There he is. Good morning, everyone. This is the Alameda Chamber Economic Alliance, and this is our Economic and Government Affairs Committee meeting for the month of October. I'm Becca Parada. Welcome, everyone. This meeting is being recorded. And if you're not presenting or asking a question, kindly mute yourself. We are going to have a couple of presentations this morning. We will follow that with any questions from this group. And then after that, we will go into introductions by the 5 candidates running for Alameda City Council. So this is definitely one of our most popular meetings every couple of years, very well attended. Everyone is eager to know what's happening. And I'd like to introduce our 2 guest speakers. The first one is, can you hear me okay? All right. My first one is Tom Clifford. Tom Clifford is a principal at Clifford Moss. He is a seasoned political and election strategist, attorney, and communications navigator with significant experience leading complex, diverse, must-win projects in the public arena. Tom graduated UC Berkeley, worked in the state capitol, and served as a Coro Fellow before completing a joint graduate degree in law at UC Berkeley Bolt and public policy at Princeton. He later practiced public law and litigation at Bingham McCutcheon in San Francisco for 6 years before moving into political consulting. And our next presenter is Dave Metz. FM3 research partner and president Dave Metz has provided opinion research and strategic guidance to hundreds of nonprofit organizations, government agencies, businesses, and political campaigns in all 50 states since joining the firm in 1998. In the 2022 election cycle, Dave's research helped elect 4 Democratic members of Congress, a dozen state legislators, and the mayor of San Jose, and pass statewide ballot measures to promote gun responsibility in Oregon, ban flavored tobacco sales in California, secure billions in land conservation funding in New York and Rhode Island, and legalize the therapeutic use of psychedelics in Colorado. So welcome to Tommy and Dave. Thank you for joining us. I'm not sure who's going to go first or if we have any October surprises, but we're looking forward to hearing from you. So Tom, are you going to kick us off?
It's an October surprise. I have a video hitting Dave Metz on all of his negatives right now. No, Dave's going to go first and talk about some big trends, statewide stuff, and then I'll dive into some of the regional races, campaign related sort of tactical issues. So go ahead, Dave, if you're
perfect. Thank you.
Ready.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Tom. So I'll sort of start with the very big picture, sort of national political context, and then work down to sort of where we are in California and some regional things before handing it off to Tommy for the more local view. As all of you who are undoubtedly following the day-to-day polling know, the race is incredibly close right now for president. We have, and I say this as a Democratic political consultant, obviously we had some pretty dark days over the course of the summer as we had the first presidential debate where Biden significantly underperformed. His numbers really started to plummet. And we have felt a lot better since Harris took over at the top of the ticket. And the numbers have improved. But all that has really happened is Harris has regained a lot of the territory that Biden lost earlier this year. She is not in any materially stronger position than Biden was at roughly this point in 2020. And we need to remember, while Biden won that election, he won it by a total of 66,000 votes across Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, and the 2nd congressional district in Nebraska. And that is basically the sort of scenario that Harris is looking at right now. Her easiest path is to win Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and that 2nd congressional district in Nebraska. There's the possibility now of some of the other states opening up a bit, North Carolina, Arizona. Talk a little bit more about that in a second, but it is about as close as it could possibly be. It's possible to construct optimistic scenarios for either party. I think the best case scenario for Democrats is that, first of all, that Trump continues to run as undisciplined a campaign as he has run so far. There are lots of very strong messages available to him at a time when people aren't happy with the current administration. They're not happy with the economy, in particular the cost of living, which is usually the biggest predictor of presidential votes. But, he spends most of his time instead litigating January 6th, his personal grievances, rambling about the various subjects that come up at his rallies. And despite having what, talking to Republican consultants, is a much more professional campaign operation in their estimation this time around, he just doesn't stick with that program. And that obviously creates news cycles that work more to Harris's benefit than not. So if there is continued fatigue with that kind of performance, the kind of thing that drove largely suburban women in places like Georgia and Atlanta to vote for Biden last time, it's hard to imagine them saying to themselves, man, I didn't sign up for this in 2020, but I want to sign up for it again now. And then in tandem with that, the optimistic scenario for Democrats is if Harris can drive a positive economic message, the elements of what she's proposed polled great. In fact, the one pollster tested 5 of the major economic proposals from Trump and from Harris. 4 of the 5 most popular were things that Harris proposed as opposed to things that Trump proposed. So there's a lot that she can talk about on the issue that is most on voters' minds. And then I think the other thing that's a positive scenario for Democrats is, there's usually a dynamic where in a presidential year, you consider the top of the ticket, the presidential campaign, to be the thing that will either lift up or suppress candidates lower down. But in a number of key swing states, there are prominent Republican candidates that have the potential to actually negatively impact where swing voters in their states may go. This was the case in 2020. Think about Herschel Walker in Georgia, for example, which probably played a key role in Republicans losing that state, both the Senate race and the presidential race. This time we've got Kari Lake once again in Arizona, who's losing by double digits to Ruben Gallego in the Senate race and is negatively viewed even by many Republicans. And then Mark Robinson in North Carolina, their gubernatorial candidate, who is down by 18 points to the Democratic candidate in the state that Trump won both times. Those are lead weights on the Republican ticket, which could potentially help Harris. So all of those things, if that continues to play out, it looks good for the Democrats. But there's also an optimistic scenario that one can paint for Trump just as easily. First, the degree to which the Harris and Walz campaigns have kind of pulled back since the convention and have not been very aggressive in having a public presence, doing major interviews, doing rallies. That may not work out well for them. The polling really hasn't gone up much over the course of the last couple of weeks after the initial rally that Harris had. This week, she's, I think, very smartly doing a lot of media on platforms that attract a lot of attention, but not necessarily from political obsessives. And those are places where swing voters go. They aren't listening to The Daily. They aren't listening to Ezra Klein's podcast. They're listening to Call Her Daddy with Alex Cooper. They're watching The View. They're listening to sports podcasts. And to the extent that the campaign focuses on those, that may help. The other things that I think are really helpful for Trump are just the continued association with the Biden administration. Harris is in a very tough spot. She can't hold the current administration at arm's length. She's part of it. She feels understandable loyalty to Joe Biden. And yet, at a time when voters are looking for change, it's kind of incumbent on her to make that case. The other thing that bodes well for Trump is that despite the fact that Harris has improved numbers among younger voters, African Americans, Latinos, she still is not performing as well among those subgroups as Biden did in 2020, let alone as well as Barack Obama did in previous elections. And unless she's able to close that gap a little further, it's going to be hard for her to get a comfortable margin. So what this adds up to is you can make a compelling case that either candidate could win. This is, of course, as a pollster, this is a tough place to be. It was a tough place for us in 2016 and 2020, and there were a lot of significant polling misses. As an industry, I think we've tried to take some actions to address the flaws in polling in those 2 years, but it's a close enough race that it really could go either way. I think one key factor to think about that's getting a lot of attention here is undecided voters. When you've got a 2-3 point race nationally and 1 point or less in most of these swing states, The set of voters who haven't made up their minds yet, which is small, it's no more than sort of 5 to 8% in most polls at most. What they're going to, how they're going to make up their minds is going to be critical. And they're a very hard to grasp group for a number of reasons. They're disproportionately young, they're politically independent, and they have very, very low levels of engagement in politics. Means that there's a relatively high chance that they don't vote at all, let alone decide to vote for the candidate that either campaign is trying to get them to vote for. And it means they're really hard to poll. They're a hard group to get to respond to phone outreach, text outreach, all the things that we pollsters do to try to get people to answer questions. But we do know from some intensive research a little bit more about who these folks are. They skew probably center right in terms of their political ideology. Cost of living is their dominant concern. And, in reaching them, there's been a lot of talk. I think the mainstream media has really focused on these voters' expressed desire to get more information about the candidates' policies and about Kamala Harris in particular. But I think this is taking at face value what these voters are saying in a way that I'm not sure actually reflects how they're going to ultimately make up their minds. Most of these voters fall into a category of what one academic has called news avoiders. These are people who are not only not paying attention to political news, they actively try to avoid it. They're not interested in it. They find it aggravating. They'd much rather spend their time on all the other kinds of social and cultural information that is out there. And so they actually aren't seeking out information about policies. When someone hasn't made up their mind and something is, obviously momentous as the presidential race, and you ask them why, they understand sort of what we're supposed to say as citizens and voters. Well, I'm gonna look at what they're gonna do on the major issues, and once I've done that, I'll make up my mind. But for a lot of these voters, it is simply not the case that they're waiting until a week before the election with a stack of white papers on their kitchen table, one from Trump and one from Harris, and they're going to spend an evening sorting through them and checking pros and cons. Instead, what they mainly vote on is a sense of, is this candidate someone who sees the world through the same eyes I do, has the same kinds of experiences, understands the challenges that I'm facing? And for many of these undecided voters, that is based more, for lack of a better word, on vibes than it is on issue positions. And that's part of what makes it so hard to tell whether many of them are going to vote, let alone which way they're going to vote. So I think we're all going to be remain on pins and needles for a while longer as they sort themselves out. Turning to the state picture in California, it is not drastically different from when we spoke earlier this year. I think we talked to you guys in January. People still have the same basic negative perception about the direction of the state. Only 33% as of this morning. I'm just looking at some fresh poll data here. 33% of Californians think the state is headed in the right direction. 56% think it's on the wrong track. That's been a fairly stable number over the course of most of the year. Both the governor and the state legislature are viewed net negatively by California voters right now. In Newsom's case, by a relatively slim margin, in the legislature by a slightly larger one. And that's driven largely by dissatisfaction with the same suite of issues that have been at the top of Californians' list of concerns for years now. The cost of living, and especially the cost of housing, homelessness, and then concerns related to public safety and public disorder. Crime, more property crime than violent crime in most parts of the state, and public drug use are major concerns. Interestingly, we're polling the presidential race here in California. As of this morning, Harris leads Trump by 22 points, 58 to 36. She's obviously going to win the state and win it widely. But it's noteworthy that Biden won it by about 30 in 2020. So she is underperforming his margin in this very blue state by about 8 points. Now, I think a lot of those voters will come home at the end of the day, but the fact that they aren't there already, despite how much they generally loathe Donald Trump, speaks to the nature of the challenges that Harris is facing right now. Here in California, we don't really have other major top-of-the-ticket races. We've got a Senate race, which Adam Schiff will win by 30 points, given the sort of odd campaign, if you want to call it a campaign, that's Steve Garvey is running. And even on the ballot measure front, which is usually where we see a lot of the money spent and attention paid in California, given Democratic dominance of the state, there's usually more uncertainty around ballot measures. This is a pretty quiet cycle overall. There are 10 measures on the ballot. Half of them are ones that are referred by the state legislature. So there's only half that made it to the ballot through the initiative process, which is a very low number historically in California. And most of them aren't getting a lot of spending. There's really two measures that have significant, well-funded campaigns, and the others, it's much more modest. In terms of what's going to happen on the state measures, some of them are fairly clear-cut. There's a couple that are more contentious. Things are a little bit different this cycle. This is the first time under a new state law that every ballot measure at the state level, when it appears on the ballot, lists the primary supporters and opponents of the measure right in the text of the ballot question. And that's producing some interesting results. There are steps that campaigns have to take in writing the pro and con arguments that they submit to sort of determine whether those names of supportive and opposed organizations will appear on the ballot. And a couple of campaigns didn't do what it took to have those names pop up. So there's some measures that are listed as having no supporters and some that are listed as having no opponents. And the impact that has on voters, I think, is going to be interesting to see. In terms of the measure's prospects, we've got two major bonds, Prop 2 for educational facilities, Prop 4 for climate investments. Both of those look likely to pass, although probably not with the same kinds of margins that bond measures have in recent California history. We also saw how Prop 1 in March struggled to get a majority, and I think these will get a majority with a friendlier November electorate, but probably not overwhelming ones. Prop 3 to repeal the ban on same-sex marriage in the state's constitution will win overwhelmingly. The other two are interesting. Prop 5, which would change the vote threshold for certain infrastructure finance measures at the local level, is probably headed for a loss, although voters don't necessarily know what to make of it. It would need a pretty strong campaign to pass, and it's unlikely to have one of sufficient scale to make that happen, although it's still uncertain. Prop 6, which would outlaw involuntary servitude, essentially prison labor, is getting a very mixed result in the polling. I think because a lot of voters don't understand what it is or why it's on the ballot. And there will be a campaign on that one, although not an overwhelmingly well-funded one. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Among the initiatives themselves, one that's a little counterintuitive here is Prop 32, which would establish an $18 minimum wage in California. This was put on the ballot. This was initiated even, going back to the pandemic and sort of wound its way here, funded by just a couple of wealthy donors. Labor has not gotten behind it in a real meaningful way. This is a measure that lists no supporters on the ballot, and it has a bunch of business associations listed as opponents. I think labor looks at this and says an $18 minimum wage is not worth a lot of effort when the minimum wage is, that high or higher in certain industries in certain parts of the state. And the polling on this one, as a result, is more mixed than what one would expect in a solidly blue state that's generally very pro-labor in the way it votes. Props 33 and 34, as you all probably have seen, are going to be by far the biggest spending campaigns. Full disclosure, we are working on these in opposition to 33 in support of 34. This is part of a long-running battle between Michael Weinstein at the AIDS Healthcare Foundation and the California Apartment Association about whether we're going to expand rent control in the state. 33, like its predecessors, Props 10 and 21 in 2018 and 2020, is well under 40% support in the polling. And I think if the campaigns continue, according to form, is likely to be defeated as its predecessor measures were. And then the final two, Prop 35, which would cement the state's tax on managed care health plans to help finance Medi-Cal funding, doesn't have funded opposition at this point, although it does have some institutional opposition. There are organizations against it. They're just not spending money so far. It is likely to pass, I think, with a pretty solid campaign in favor. And then Prop 36, I think, is the one that people are going to read the most into. This is the one that would repeal key elements of Prop 47, establish higher penalties for retail theft, for for drug use and possession. And in all the polling, it's way ahead. We have been working with some of the opponents of Prop 36, but the polling is pretty obvious right now. I think if it passes, there's going to be a lot of attention paid to the degree to which, in a Democratic state that voted to reduce these penalties 10 years ago, we're now seeing solid majorities, including in most polling, a majority of Democrats, indicating that they want to take a different direction. How that plays out in the future and sort of what implications it has for the way legislators think about issues around public safety and criminal justice, I think will be something to keep an eye on. And then finally, it's never too early to look at what will be the next big race in California, which is the governor's race in 2026. We already have a half dozen or so declared candidates. There is no front runner. Everyone is sort of polling in the high single digits or low double digits. And none of them are terribly well known or have a really entrenched base of public support. And a lot of, frankly, pretty smart and thoughtful and experienced candidates who are in the mix. That campaign will heat up pretty quickly, I think, after November. And that will be an interesting one to keep an eye on as we move into the next cycle. So that's the national and state picture. I'll hand it over to Tommy to talk a little bit more about the local level.
Thanks, Dave. Any questions on that before we jump into kind of state, regional, local? That's a lot of good info. All right, we'll take questions at the end. Adrian says thank you in the chat.
There's a question in the chat about the impact of the conflict in Gaza on the presidential race. I got to be honest, as tragic as circumstances are there, I think it is likely to have very little impact on the presidential race. In polling, when you ask people about a list of 15 or 20 issues, it is the one that they express the least concern about overall. The most progressive voters and the youngest voters express higher levels of concern about it. But even among those who are under 30 and polling just of the youngest voters, it ranks pretty close to the bottom of the list of their concerns, with the cost of living, even for those voters in their 20s, still the thing that they're by far most concerned about. Now, I do think that in some very local areas, it could have an impact, most obviously in Michigan, where there is a very sizable Arab American vote and a fairly organized movement that has expressed dissatisfaction with all the candidates' positions on this issue. But over the course of the last few days, this movement, the uncommitted movement, which led a lot of people to not vote to support Biden in Michigan's primary, has been talking with the Harris campaign, and there are some indications that they may be supportive with some conditions attached to it. But that is a state where that's a close enough race, sizable enough segment of the vote, that if they choose not to vote or vote for a third party, that could make a difference. But nationally, I think the data suggests it's not likely to be a determinative issue.
I'm just picking up Prop 34. Could you discuss it in a little bit more detail? Is a question in the chat. One thing before Dave goes, I would just extend the comment in terms of the question around polling in the presidential race with respect to the issues in Gaza to the regional level and to the state level. Yeah, I mean, Dave's firm's been involved in polling on this. We've seen polling up and down the state that indicates while it's an issue that attracts a lot of attention, I don't see it having a ton of impact in local and regional races either. Dave, notes on Prop 34?
Yes. So sorry, Prop 34 sort of goes hand in hand with 33. Without getting too mired in the details of the policy, the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, run by Michael Weinstein, is the beneficiary of the 340B program. It's essentially a federal program that allows nonprofit pharmacies to sell drugs at a discounted price, or to purchase drugs at a discounted price, sell them at a higher one, retain the profits from that transaction, to use to advance their mission to support healthcare programs. The way that is defined in law is very liberal, and across the country there has been some controversy about the way that these monies have been used. In the AIDS Healthcare Foundation's case, they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars on ballot measure campaigns on issues relating to rent control. And there's other organizations that have used money in ways that are similarly questionable. So Prop 34 was placed on the ballot to constrain the way that organizations that have used these funds in ways that don't fund healthcare directly can use them in the future. The AIDS Healthcare Foundation has labeled this a revenge initiative. They see it as targeting them specifically in their political activity. The supporters of Prop 34 say that that's not the case. You all can read more about it, but the two campaigns are linked, and that's why you're seeing some ads that are talking about both of them sort of hand in hand. There's the same players that are the big funders on both sides. And that one is one it's actually very hard to know where that one's going to land. It's frankly a pretty confusing issue, as you may have been able to tell just from my short description here.
And confused voters, Dave, they vote yes, right?
Every single time.
No, confused voters vote no. All right, I'm going to jump into some sort of regional and other issues. I actually have I'm going to pull up a doc here because I'm nerdy like that and got to keep track of my notes, Becca. Can everybody see my screen? See that all right? Can I just get a thumbs up from somebody? Becca, am I good?
Yep.
Cool. All right, so we are in it, folks. Has anybody, raise your hand if you've gotten your ballot? Has anybody actually got, not your sample ballot, not the little voter guide, but your actual ballot? I think the answer should still be no for most people. Diego got it. Talk to us, Diego. Is it the actual ballot? Can you vote it?
I did. I got my ballot, but I live in Sacramento, though.
Okay,
but I got mine yesterday.
You're not in Alameda County. Good. Yes, some ballots are supposed to have mailed Monday. There are some counties that mail them Friday, much to the chagrin of political campaigns and political consultants like me, because we kind of time everything for when ballots are going to mail. But in Alameda County, in the city of Alameda, they should be arriving sometime this week. So this is kind of affectionately known as the week the shit hits the fan in most campaigns, because it becomes really real because voters are voting, right? And if you have a revenue measure on the ballot, folks start calling whomever to complain about this new tax that's going to be raised. If you're a candidate, you realize that like maybe part of your candidate statement got filed wrong. All kinds of things happen this week. Buckle up, enjoy it. Couple of state and regional trends. First, Dave kind of already hit this, but voters are still in a bad mood. This is true everywhere in the state of California. And Dave's firm focuses, kind of across the country. My firm focuses on California from the border between San Diego and Mexico all the way up to the Oregon border. So we focus on California only. And I can tell you in almost every city and jurisdiction in California, voters who say we're on the wrong track far outnumber voters who say we're on the right track. I'm going to show you a slide in a second that actually indicates that Alameda is a little bit different, and that some of your recent numbers have you a little bit more positive than other areas, which is interesting. A lot of folks have talked about the turnout bump, right? The bump because of the switch at the top of the ticket in the presidential race, and that there may be Kamala voters who vote who haven't voted in the past. For those of you running local or regional elections, I would focus on this issue of down ballot drop off. And I think probably everybody here knows this, but just a level set. What we mean by that is there are a significant number of voters who will come out to vote and vote in the presidential race and then stop. And if you have an issue that requires that bump, that surge voter, right, who is generally younger, more democratic, et cetera, you've got to focus on getting people to look down their ballot and vote all of these issues. And some of the issues that Dave went through on the statewide ballot will depend, their win will entirely depend on what happens with surge voters and whether or not they actually vote in the statewide propositions and don't just stop at the presidential race. So that's always a question and an issue. I just thought I'd go through a couple of these campaign tactics that everybody's using and talk about them a little bit. I know there are a number of folks on this call, and I can't see the chat right now because I'm sharing. So if there are questions, Becca or somebody, just throw them at me. But tactics-wise, phones are still actually pretty important. Anything that grabs a voter's attention for like 20 seconds and actually gets them to focus on your issue matters. but the tools that are required to actually get that done in the modern era are very inefficient. So if anybody is out there phone banking, people don't pick up the phone. Campaigns complain. No one's answering. That is true, right? But don't think you're winning because you sent a bunch of texts or email blasts, because no one's paying attention to that anymore. So phones answer rates have declined. I think they can still be important. I think texts, everybody's getting a million texts. If you haven't gotten your text from the Kamala campaign asking for $7 and scolding you for not having contributed yet, I'm sure it's coming. Just the over usage of texting as a campaign tool means that texting is easy to do. You can get them out quick. They're cheap, but they're largely ineffective. I would say in most places up and down the state, we are only using text at this point as like a GOTV chase, right? Folks who we know are yes voters, who were concerned about not voting their entire ballot, making sure that they're going to, focus on their whole ballot and vote for us. Volunteerism, and this may not be true in every race. Maybe some of you on this call who are running for city council have an incredible group of volunteers. Congratulations. It is down. It has declined. It was declining when we got to COVID, and it's continued to drop, which, I think is tragic. Volunteering on a campaign, whether you're, just out of college or a high schooler or a senior, I think is an incredible experience. It's sad to see volunteerism drop. I hope it will come back, but it's more and more difficult to get people to turn out to do campaign work. I think mail and digital still dominate. A lot of folks think mail is dead. I think mail is still alive. Yes, voters will take that mail piece that you spent months raising money for, pick it up, look at it on their way to the garbage and throw it in the garbage. But even that 5 or 10 second span does help to build name rec. One thing that I think is important about mail, if folks have the resources, is that you send multiple pieces, right? It's better to focus on a more narrow target with more frequency than a big broad target one time over the course of 28 days. Digital is rising. You see a lot of this, right? This is cord cutters, CTV, OTT, stuff that comes through Hulu and Peacock. All of that is pegged to the voter file now. So you can actually target digital like you target mail. And that's why you've seen an increase in this. The same is true with paid social media advertising. That is not coming to you by accident, folks. That's either coming to you because you went to a campaign's website and they're retargeting, meaning they have a pixel in their campaign that says, hey, anybody that came to my website, I want to make sure they see my digital ads or my static ads. Or you live within a jurisdiction that they're targeting and they have a link between your IP address and and who you are in the voter file. You are not getting those ads by accident. I think in smaller races, and I kind of want to stress this for this call, Becca, right? If you're running for office in the city of Alameda, knock on doors. Knock on doors. It matters. It is incredibly inefficient, but it matters, right? The fact that you can have conversations with your neighbors about your local race, that's the way you break through. And even that said, breaking through is tough. But I think, if you really commit yourself to 2 or 3 of these verticals, if you're running for office on this call or you're thinking about running out for office in the future, there's one thing I know and that is 1 million people will come to you with 1 million ideas. Do not try to run on 1 million ideas. Execute 2 or 3 things well. A mail program, your field program, and maybe a sign program. Or I'm going to go digital, I'm going to do phones, and we're going to knock. Have a couple of verticals that you navigate well and focus on those and beat those verticals up. Do not try to be all things to all people. All right, that's my campaign tactics spiel.
Tommy, we got a question in the chat. I'm curious.
Sure.
They're asking, back to digital ads, what kind of digital ads are the most effective?
I mean, I think that the queen of digital ads is anything video, right? But don't do like a magnum opus minute 40 spot on yourself. No one except you and your family cares. Do a 30-second spot, do a 15-second spot. That's 30s are the new minute spot. No one watches anything for longer than, 20, 25 seconds at this point. So pretty much everything we do now is either a 30 or a 15, which is incredibly difficult, folks, because you can't talk about why you're running for office in that short of time period, but that's the time frame you're working in. I would say video is king and queen. And I'm happy to pick up more of the campaign stuff at the end. I do want to go through a couple of sort of things that I'm watching. So Dave talked far more eloquently than I would ever be able to about all the statewide propositions. Prop 5, I think, is incredibly important if you live in a community like Alameda. I think it's as Dave mentioned, the polling is not great on Prop 5. This is the measure that would lower the threshold for infrastructure bond measures and affordable housing bond measures from 2/3 to 55%. It would essentially level the playing field between affordable housing and infrastructure bonds with school bonds. This is a big deal. If you live in an area of Alameda that has potholes in the roads, or you live on the coastline in Alameda and you're worried about sea level rise, it's likely that in the next 4 to 8 years, the only way you will ever find the level of investment needed to fix some of that is through an infrastructure bond. And, we talked about voter mood previously. Voter mood is so bad right now that it's difficult to pass anything at 2/3. Prop 5 is a big deal. Lowering the threshold to 55%, still a supermajority required to pass those measures, but something more manageable could really change the way infrastructure is funded across the state of California. And I think it's just one I'm watching closely. In terms of other races regionally that affect Alameda Senate District 7, right? So that's the race to see who's going to take over for Nancy Skinner, who's been our longtime state senator. That's the mayor of Berkeley, Jesse Erreguin, who has racked up, most of the local endorsements, including many of the local endorsements on the island, and has sort of continued to persist in polling, endorsed by the Democratic Party and others. And he's running against Javanka Beckles, who serves on the AC Transit Board. I'm partisan in that race, so I won't get too deep into it, other than to say, to me, this is a no-brainer. Jesse Erreguin is the solid choice. The DA recall, that affects folks on the island. And whether you are for or against recalls, the polling in that, I think, has been consistently clear. And Dave, if you have anything you want to add to this, you can. The DA's recall seems to be very likely to prevail. Pam Price is losing in most parts of the county, including in the last 3 polls I've seen in Oakland, where she would need to win handily to beat the recall. And so, I think recall is likely in the DA's race. Dave, anything you want to add polling wise on that race?
Just to affirm everything you've just said, we have some recent polling in Oakland that shows both the Price recall is likely to succeed there, which is, the city that would need to overwhelmingly vote to retain her in order to be successful. And hand in hand with that, there's also obviously a recall election for Mayor Tao in Oakland. And that one also, given her deep unpopularity in the city, looks pretty likely to succeed.
Yep. The Alameda County Board of Supervisors continues to change. This actually doesn't affect the island, as you know, Becca. I just thought it was important to turn out. This is a board that forever was exceedingly stable. And I use stable in a very positive way. It was a board that had no turnover for a long time. And, yet again, this cycle, like we did last cycle, we're going to see a longtime serving supervisor, Keith Carson. He elected not to run. Nikki Bass, who is the city council president in Oakland, is running against John Bowders, who's the city council member from Emeryville. That's actually a fairly hot race, as those affairs generally go. And, one of them will be, irrespective of who wins, there will be another new face on the Board of Supervisors. So lots of turnover in our county government. Bart Latifah Simon is running for Congress, and running is a strong word. She's winning for Congress. And I think Victor Flores, I saw on this call, is running to be your next Bart district representative. Victor's running against Dana Lang. Again, I'm partisan in this race, so hard for me not to give a plug for Victor Flores here, who's just an incredible young man. Served as an environmental and transit activist for a long time. His personal story is really compelling. I won't get too deep into the details, but to me, Victor Flores is the guy. I wanted to end here on notes on your neighbor. So I know that this is Alameda and not Oakland. And Dave, you stole my thunder a little bit, but there is tons of upheaval across the estuary. Chang Tao is highly likely to lose her recall, as Dave said. I mean, and we're not even looking, I think, Dave, at the same polls, right? So I give it even more veracity. The last 3 polls I've seen, including one last week, has that recall prevailing in like the 60s. And so, I mean, she's very likely to beat back that recall, which will trigger a new mayoral election in the spring of 25. I think the other important thing to note is that there will be significant change on the city council in Oakland this cycle. And since it's Oakland, I won't go deep into it other than to say we're going to see one, we could see as many as 4 city council seats turn over as well. We are definitely going to see the at-large seat. Rebecca Kaplan, for the first time in 20 years, is not on the ballot. So that'll be new. And District 1, Dan Kolb, who served for 12 years, is not running. And Treva Reed is not running in 7. So there will be at least 3 new city council members in the city of Oakland. So let me turn to Alameda real quick, and then I'll stop and we can take questions. I did want to share, I mentioned before, doom and gloom. I just dug up a slide I found on the web. But there's a lot of lines running around here. And this may or may not be one of your polls, Dave. But there are a lot of lines running around here. I think the thing that's interesting is that when we look at Oakland or San Francisco or San Jose, the bigger cities in the Bay Area, right track, wrong track is like 70. I mean, I think Oakland right now is like 73% wrong track. It's not quite the same in Alameda. Now, these are numbers from the summer. They're a couple of months old, but 37% of voters were kind of mixed, right? 29% saying right track, 26% wrong track. It's not as dire on the island, and perhaps you all feel that a little bit. So I just want to share this to say, like, not all hope is lost in local communities that have a sense of place and self like Alameda. And I have seen this in several other communities across the state where there's kind of a sense of like, this is our town, right? Maybe there are some well-defined city boundaries, like people know when they live there. And that's not just island cities, because there aren't that many of them in California. That's up north. There are a couple of towns that surprisingly are much more positive than kind of the general state of things in California. So I just thought this was interesting. I wouldn't call this overwhelmingly positive, but I would call it not as negative as some other places. Just real quick for the wonks, I thought I'd just sort of share some data about Alameda. And then, we can kind of chop it up, because I know folks on this call are actually running for city council. You probably know this if you're running. If you don't, I hope you do. This is what I'd focus on here, right? Is who's likely to vote. And this is a big turnout number. Whether or not we get to this still remains to be seen. But of the 50,000 or so voters, we think maybe 43,000 will vote in 25,000 households. This is an important split if you're running for office. Who votes their ballot early? So these are folks who, from years of data, we know they get their ballot, right? Whether that's tomorrow or today when with the post office delivers the mail, and they vote right away. They're going to vote this weekend. Those are folks you've got to be communicating to right now, people, if you're not, okay? And then we also know there are folks like me who get their ballot and it sits on their kitchen table for 28 days. And then I walk it into the polling place on the day of the election. Everybody is different, but those patterns become predictable, and they should have some play in the way you're prosecuting your campaigns. This is Alameda by political party, not surprising, right? Overwhelmingly Democratic. The no party preference, more and more, this is a trend we see everywhere, right? Where younger voters are not registering to a party. I would say the NPP chunk of voters in the city of Alameda probably lean more Democrat, skew younger. And that Republican number, while only 10%, that's triple of the Republican registration number in your neighbor across the estuary, Oakland. A couple of other just quick things here. Here are the splits by age. Actually relatively diverse by age. Although I will say that likely November voters, 43% plus are 55 and older, right? And far fewer voters are in that sort of 18 to 24 chunk. This is your voter data by ethnicity. This is not the demographics of the city of Alameda. I repeat, this is not the demographics of your city. This is who will actually turn out to vote. And if you study this pie chart on the right side, the likely November 2024, it's very different than what the actual demographics are of the city of Alameda. And here it is by home ownership, pretty split in Alameda. And then I'll just conclude, Becca, on kind of the thing that everybody here knows, right? Which is the auditor and the treasurer are running unopposed. No action there. I think the real action is here in terms of the city council race. Malia Vela was termed out and not running again. Trish is running again for another term, and you have a multitude of additional candidates who are running for, essentially 2 seats. So I know there's a lot of activity on the city council side. I won't say much more about that because I know you have the candidates here today, and they're going to kind of give you all their pitch. But if you're one of the folks who falls in this band, make sure you understand who votes, when they vote, who they are. And, again, not to give unsolicited advice, but have a campaign plan that doesn't try to be everything to all people, because people love to give advice about how you should run your campaign. Have a plan to do 2 or 3 or 4 things really well, and then execute the hell out of it. That's a quick rundown for you, Becca. I'll stop there and take any questions.
Good, and good advice, Tommy. Well, I have a question just to kick it off for both you and Dave. So if we could just spend a minute talking about younger voters. I know we all have them probably in our households. I know I do. I've been reading more about registration of younger voters. How do you reach our young voters, and what are they responding to generally?
Dave, thoughts on that?
Well, from our perspective, from a polling perspective, we need to reach them largely by text. The example I always give is I've got a 20-year-old son who's in college, and if I need to reach him and I call him on his phone, even though he has a telephone that he carries with him everywhere, which for those of us when we were young, the notion that we wouldn't accept a call if we had this miraculous technological device is strange, but he'll never pick up the phone. But if I text him, I can usually get a response in 5 or 10 seconds. My 89-year-old father has a mobile phone, and I can send him a text message. It might be 3 weeks before he notices that it's there. But if I call him on his landline phone, he'll answer on the 3rd ring every single time, no matter who's calling. So, we just need to reach people where they are in terms of the way that they're using technology and communications. And so for young people, it is, from a pollster's perspective, it's sending text messages. The tools that Tommy can talk more about, the tools that are used in campaigns, but I think they're facing similar dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's right from a how do you get to them perspective. I think the challenge with text is, as I said earlier, it's just so ubiquitous in political campaigns now that it's overwhelming. Raise your hand if you're on screen, if you've gotten a political text this cycle from anybody running for anything, right? Raise your hand if you've gotten a ton, and you can self-define a ton. Okay, so the more that starts, it's sort of like robocalls back in the day. Remember when you used to get those robocall recordings and very few people use them anymore? Campaigns loved robocalls because they were cheap, and it made them feel like they were doing something. But feeling like you're doing something and actually doing things that have electoral impact, that can be very different. So I agree with you 100%. That text is sort of where the young folks are. I have 3 kids myself. They don't even respond to text anymore. They're like, text, that's old school. You got to hit me up in DM on Instagram or Snapchat or something. But the challenge is that medium is super easy and super cheap. And so it's been flooded. I think for young people in a campaign, you've got to find an issue or a singular issue that actually engages them in the political process. So, I'll give you an example. I was running a state Senate race last cycle, not this cycle, in the South Bay. And, the way we were able to engage young voters was on the issues that we were working around climate change, right? There was a very significant block of young voters who were super interested in climate issues. And we stepped, I think, way more into that sort of policy area than we may have otherwise done because we wanted to engage young voters in the process. I think you got to meet them when you're at. I totally agree with Dave. And part of that is meeting them where they're at from a policy perspective. They're not necessarily going to be the top 3 issues in Alameda right now are crime, the cost of housing, and I would say sort of homelessness, clean streets, et cetera, right? Your younger voters may not care about any of this. They don't own a home. They're not that worried about crime, right? They might actually be super concerned about sea level rise or the way that climate's going to impact the island. So I think you also just have to have a piece of your campaign that focuses on policy issues that matter to them. And I'm going to say something unpopular. If you're in it to win, consider the pie chart that I showed with the age breakouts of the likely voter pool. And only 7% of the likely voter pool is between the ages of 18 and 24. So if you're spending too much of your campaign time focused on 7% and not on the 93%, the dinner, right? You're probably making some tactically incorrect decisions. And I say that with chagrin because I want more young people to vote. But you also have to be realistic if you're trying to win about people who are going to vote on the national.
Thank you. Okay, good. That is very helpful. So any other questions from this group? And the screen is quite large. So if I don't see you raising your hand, feel free to just shout it out. Any questions for either Tommy or Dave? Okay. Great. That means you did a great job. You answered all of our questions and we're ready to vote the minute the ballot comes in the mail, hopefully today or tomorrow. Thank you both very much. Really appreciate the update.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
All right. So next we're going to move on to hyperlocal, our candidates who are running for Alameda City Council. And we've decided that we're going to keep it brief in the interest of time. Everyone has to get to work. So we are going to ask each of them to give 3 minutes, no more than 5 max, just telling us a little bit about themselves and their campaign. So I'm actually going to start. Well, I'll tell you who each of them are first. So we have our incumbent council member, Trish Herrera Spencer. We have candidate Steve Slauson. We have Tushan Amarasiri Wardena, Michelle Pryor, and Greg Bowler. And I am going to start with our incumbent council member, Trish Herrera Spencer. Welcome. You're on mute.
Yes, I just unmuted. All right, thank you. First of all, I want to thank Becca, the chamber, but I also want to thank our speakers. I thought Tom and David did a great job, very enlightening. I'm kind of casual today because I just volunteered for Walk and Roll to School Day, which is something I've actually been doing since like 2006. And that is one of the things that separates me from the people that are running against me, is that I've been involved for 25 years as a volunteer in our community. I've been, many of you know this, right? Prior mayor, prior council member, 2-time elected for school board. But there are some issues that, but for me being on council, I honestly think would not have happened, that is extremely significant. The CARE team, that was a split vote at the council level. 3 of us supported the current makeup of having Fire be the lead and Alameda Family Services support them. And Fire, only 2 entities applied, Felton and Fire. And Fire didn't have the social welfare component. And I actually initiated at that first meeting saying, why don't we get Alameda Family Services to be the support for Fire? And even with that though, and they had never been contacted, I actually reached out to Alameda Family Services after that first meeting to ask them why hadn't they applied. And guess what? They hadn't heard about it. So I connected those dots, they applied, and the rest is history. That is an award-winning team, and it is because of the uniqueness of our community. Fire had already been community paramedics, which program was piloted while I was mayor. So I was very familiar with those 2 entities from my service on the school board. I knew Alameda Family Services, and then my prior service as mayor in regards to knowing our community paramedics. And so that is how I came up with that idea. But it was still controversial. It's a 3-2 vote at the council level. I fought for that, and it has really, really worked. Another issue that, I believe is FOS. It was while I was mayor that was also controversial to take it from police. And I worked very, very hard to get that contract to FOS. And again, they've done a stellar job that we've all gotten behind. Gene Sweeney Open Space Park, that's another thing that's very important to many of us that I was critical in going down to LA and helping get the funding for that. Ocean Cleanup Project. staff hadn't returned calls. Liz Taylor reached out to them to have them reach out to me to make that happen here in Alameda. Cannabis, I drove that to our dispensaries, which, as we all know, has been very important to our business districts. I do support local businesses. I quite often am the only one that show up at chamber events, including the mayor. It is me. In fact, yesterday I was at the Hornet honoring our Vietnam veterans. I was the only council member that was there. They are looking for financial support. If any of you are interested, I wanted to pitch that because it is critical to support our veterans. I always try to, on the issues, public safety is my primary issue. I'm yes on 36. I'm yes on the recall of Pamela Price. They are critical. It does impact Alameda. It impacts our ability to hire police, to retain police, and the safety for us within our community. I think it is an important step moving forward. But our local artists, our organizations, whether it's Meals on Wheels, Food Bank, there's so many that I've supported over the years that honestly makes our community stronger and more vibrant. On my website, trishforyou.com, I always give up my phone number, 510-761-5123. And votetrish@gmail.com is my website. Feel free to reach out to me if you'd like more information. And I truly appreciate your consideration and hopefully your vote. Thanks so much.
Thank you, council member. Okay, Steve Slauson, are you still here?
Good morning, I'm still here.
Good morning, welcome.
Good morning, I'm Steve Slauson and I'm running for Alameda City Council. I was born and raised in Alameda. I graduated from Alameda High. Our kids graduated from Alameda High, and our granddaughter is going to Alameda High. I am on the board of directors of the Alameda Citizens Task Force. I'm a member of the Alameda County Taxpayers Association. I'm still working, and I still walk the golf course. I will continue to preserve Alameda's historic single-family neighborhoods. I campaigned for the enactment of Alameda's Measure A, and I campaigned against the measure that tried to overturn Measure A. I will continue to support the building of affordable housing in Alameda's redevelopment areas, like the old shipyard off Clement, the former Pennzoil Depot, and the long gone industrial base of Alameda that is rapidly disappearing. I will continue to support the excellence of our school system. My wife worked for the school district, and our son is a teacher for the school district. I campaigned for the passage of every school bond since I've been able to vote. My company, Triple S Electric Company, performed the electrical portion of the Payton School remodel, the Haight School remodel, the Washington School remodel, the multipurpose buildings at Edison and Payton, and the underground at Ruby Bridges. I will continue to support the upgrades of our school buildings. I will continue to support the youth athletic programs like Little League Baseball and soccer. Our kids participated in these programs, and I work for fundraisers on these programs. I will continue to support the efforts of the police department to keep the riffraff out of Alameda. My van has been broken into 8 times over the years, and I caught 4 of the criminals with the help of the cops. Our neighborhood has caught 3 criminals who tried to burglarize our houses. We have a neighborhood watch program in the area I live in, and it's been successful. I will continue to support the installation of the Veterans Building at the old Navy base. Veterans have a priority with me. I'm a licensed electrical engineer and a licensed electrical contractor. I have been dealing with City Hall and Alameda Municipal Power for a long time. I am familiar with the workings of City Hall and have participated in many council meetings. I have a vested interest in maintaining Alameda's high quality of life. You have the right to safe neighborhoods, safe shopping centers, safe business districts, safe streets without fear of being mugged or shot. I'll make sure there's enough cops on the beat to take care of you.
Thank you. Okay, let's go next to Michelle Pryor. Good morning, Michelle.
Hi, good morning. All right, I don't do good off the cuff. I'm very chatty. All right, so I'm Michelle Pryor, and I'm running for city council here in Alameda. I lived here 7 years as a renter and am now a homeowner for the past 4 years. I've been a special education teacher for 15 years, and I'm currently serving as vice president of the Fremont Teachers Union. Full-time. We have 42 schools serving 32,000 students. In this capacity, I support our bargaining team as they negotiate a multi-million-dollar contract with our district, put feet to the fire to uphold our existing contract, and collaborate with community leaders. But before I became a teacher, I was myself a small business owner. I owned an all-state agency for 4 years. And it was here that I learned how valuable the Chamber of Commerce is to our communities and in lifting one another up. Unfortunately, a lot of your events are on Thursdays, and those are days I am already have meetings in Fremont. But I was able to go to the one at the Hornet. I don't think that was a chamber meeting, but anyway, I would love to go to more. It is in this spirit, though, that I plan to lead in Alameda. We have a lot of momentum when it comes to building safer streets, affordable housing, and climate resiliency. Yet we can do so much more, specifically with regards to the city's economic development plan. For example, the last report I read shows that Park and Webster Street have a combined 65,000 square foot vacancy. I wholeheartedly support efforts to vigorously bring in thriving small and regional chain businesses. And we also need to continue our focus to grow businesses in sectors such as life sciences, a clean and green high tech, blue tech, and more. Another challenge we'll face as we build homes and bring in amazing businesses is an increase in traffic. Yet, I also see this as an opportunity to invest in reliable, safe, and efficient public transit. Furthermore, we can continue to build safer streets for cyclists and pedestrians. So speaking of public safety, there are other ways we can improve upon. With regards to sea level rise, Alameda is already taking steps. The Alameda, Oakland, San Leandro plan is a great example of community and environmental experts coming together so that our communities will have sustained resilience to climate change. I'd also like to fund emergency services such that they grow with our increase in housing and businesses. Let's open and update the fire station on the Point, for example. And let's fully staff our police department. So I'm going to wrap up, but I just want to say a few things. I am humbled and excited to be endorsed by Mayor Ezzy Ashcraft, Attorney General Rob Bonta, Assemblywoman Mia Bonta. I've been endorsed by City of Alameda Democrats, Alameda County Democrats, Stonewall Democrats, lots of labor organizations, Lena Tam, and more. So I'm going to end with this. I love this city, and a large reason is because everyone I've ever met here loves it as much as I do. The changes and challenges that we will face together, and I am confident that the talent, creativity, grit, and compassion of Alamedans will see us through what lies ahead. And I am just one person, but I am adept at creating, leading, and motivating teams. And I hope to be a part of our Alameda leadership team. And I'd love to have your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, and welcome to Greg Bowler. You're on mute, Greg.
It's great to see everyone. I really want to thank you, Becca, the Chamber of Commerce, and our special guest. That was terrific. thinking about the national election and all the way down to our local elections, I'm a prosecutor running for city council, which I don't think has happened before in Alameda. So I've benefited a little bit from Kamala Harris, our vice president's discussion of this, and she talks about how she has been for the people throughout her career, and the way she addresses her work in terms of not just being in the courtroom, but in general. And I've, as a prosecutor, I have literally, for 23 years, I've literally said the words Greg Buller for the people, over 1,000 times. And for me, what that means is, in terms of this work on the city council, it's that same level of discretion I have as in my work, where I'm trying to decide, as a representative of the district attorney whose mission is to seek justice. I'm trying to decide not just, week by week or day by day, but really literally hour by hour and minute by minute, is this fair? Is this unfair? Is this ethical? Is this unethical? Is it this just, or is this unjust? Isn't that the type of decision making you want on your city council? And so for me, in a particular time when we are having some hard times in certain ways in the Bay Area, and you can see that in the polling that's been discussed, it's important to think about things like public safety, affordable housing, the city design, public health, the city services, transportation issues, economic sustainability and resiliency, our infrastructure issues going forward, the future of our city. Those are all really significant, important challenges. And so I think about the decision, and it's a difficult one to run for city council, but I have some time, and I'm, at a stage in my career and close to family and at home where it makes sense to really step up and do more for a community that's given me so much. I mean, I've talked a little bit about in this campaign about how 5 generations of my family have been in Alameda. And what that really means is, in terms of working class people and teachers who have really invested in the community. And there's so many others who have made a difference in my life. So I want to do the same for others. I'm the only candidate who is endorsed by Malia Vela. I think that's significant given that there is this open seat because of her departure. And I'm the only candidate that has a combination of both her endorsement and Tracy Jensen. And just a couple of days ago, over the weekend, I was knocking door to door with Tracy Jensen, and we've been doing in the campaign door to door knocking since National Night Out, the day I filed papers on August 6th. And we're just getting a terrific response at the door. And people are really concerned about those issues that I'm saying are really at the forefront of this campaign. And it's the combination of not just those endorsements, but also the only candidate that has the backing of both the police and the fire unions in Alameda. And because these issues are so important, the regional level of government experience, being a prosecutor, someone working for the county, the ability to have communications and networking at a county level, and what that could offer to the mix for this opportunity at this time to really, raise the standards in terms of an already great city that has so much going for it, and try to add, extra level of professionalism to our work in government, try to add more common sense, add a higher level of transparency. Those are some of the things that I would hope to do if selected to be one of our next council members. And I'm just really excited about the future for our city. I just feel like this conversation today was very optimistic in sorts. We looked through some of that data and we saw there's a real sense of hope, even in a dark time, in some sense, for this city. There's so much we've done in the past. We have a really rich history in Alameda, and we've taken on really hard projects and made really transformational decisions. Thinking about some of the things ahead, it's going to be the same, but we really do have a strong foundation from which to work. And I want to really work collaboratively with everyone who's on this call, try to work together with, the city leaders to really make a difference in the community. So I really appreciate your guys' time today. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, and finally, Tushan, good morning. I can see you, but I can't hear you.
You'd think 4 years into using these tools, I would get the mute button right.
There you go.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tushan. I'm Mars Iradena, and I'm just so excited to be here with you. And just some amazing people in town are all in here. And I wanted to share what I'm excited about, what I'm feeling when I talk to people, what they're excited about for the future of this town. So, I fell in love with this place on the 4th of July back in 2011. And, when you're here, it's so easy to love it on that day specifically. And there's just so many more things to love about it. Like our downtowns are just rich in beautiful history. Like we have these beautiful homes, amazing parks. And may I add, some of the best beer in town, in the Bay Area. And so it was just the perfect place to raise a family. And so that's why I ended up here. And, as you start, raising a family, you start getting involved with the community. And then the pandemic happened. And my pandemic project was walking every street of Alameda. It was like, just like, here's the way I could best use my time. And when things started opening up, I would start interviewing people, particularly the businesses that were opening up. And I blog about it in my Instagram account, Every Street of Alameda, which I'd love for you to see of like what I've been doing. And ultimately, some of those stories I would actually move into and fully form as stories for the Alameda Post, where I once served on the board of. And I was really interested in digging into what makes this city tick, particularly from a small business perspective, because in my eyes, small businesses are doing more than just building their business. They're building our community. They're making places for us to gather. And that is such a critical part for making an amazing place. So in my time here, I feel like I've invested quite deeply. I'm the president of the Alameda Free Library Board, where I'm trying to push the Tool Library and the Alameda Point branch. On my daughter's school site committee, served on the Measure E campaign to fund our schools, the Alameda Post. And I just want to share a little bit about my career history arc. I started off as a journalist at the Boston Globe. I then did a startup making apps for kids. And I know how hard it is to build businesses. I raised venture capital, but the arc of a startup is rocky. Had periods where we weren't paying ourselves, and yet we were lucky enough to be bought by one of the major tech companies, joined Google, and ultimately I drove their first AI efforts. They're trying to bring it into production for large language models. I now serve in the federal government for another major thing. And so what I want to say is, like, I know how to work in institutions, and I'm excited to work in this institution, this beautiful town of Alameda, that is a reflection of so much history and so many things that people before us have done. I just want to continue pushing on that path. And so there are challenges, like as we heard, but there are also opportunities. A lot of families I'm hearing are just facing the tremendous cost of housing and living. And I think we need to build more to satisfy that demand. But we also need to make a vibrant place for businesses and jobs. It pains me every time I see an empty storefront on any of our downtowns. And yes, I'm hearing like everyone wants our streets to get safer and our neighborhoods. And we need to work on that and fully fund our police department, or fully staff our police department. But we also need to take some critical investments for the future, invest in the infrastructure, because as an island city, we're going to face climate change like no other in this Bay Area. So I think there's a path to it. Okay, I think we can build up by building more housing. We actually start tempering the cost of housing, which actually brings more people into our downtowns and fills our businesses with customers. It also provides a great workforce in town to fill these amazing jobs that we're trying to bring to the point in Harbor Bay. And I think that also leans us to, like, now we can start building the critical mass for transit and start hitting our climate goals, and ultimately get to a place where Alameda is an island that's thriving. I think that's the goal that we all want. So, we're in the center of one of the greatest economies in history, and we should be taking advantage of it. I want us to be a leader from the sciences to energy, green tech, blue tech, aerospace, and our small businesses. We already are, but we should knock it out of the park, the place where businesses come to. And I think we have the plans to do it. And in my eyes, as someone coming from business, strategy is a lot of hard work, but the real hard work is the execution part. And I want to be a partner with all of you to execute and do that grinding work to make things happen. And that means I would love to, if you visited my site, Tucson for Alameda. It has some of my plans for how we go for vibrant downtowns, but also how we bring jobs to the island. I'll just share my principles of how I would love to work with everyone here. I'm going to be curious and listen. I'm going to work to set goals early, not in acute situations. And I'm going to communicate those goals so everyone knows what they are and be transparent, but more so give businesses stability in understanding what the economic environment will be from the city. That means taking action like rapid permitting, probably selling more than leasing some of the buildings at the point, being pro-science and investing in our infrastructure and investing in the marketing to bring businesses here. Ultimately, I think City Council should be 100% your partners in saying that Alameda is open for business. And that is the kind of voice that I want to be for you, the business community. And I'll just end with this. Like, I am backed, I'm very proud to be backed by leaders that I hope to work with, and they want to work with me. A lot of them actually have seen me hard at work with them. And I'm backed by more than just elected leaders, but across the gamut from, Doug Biggs of the Alameda Point Collaborative to Ron and Barbara Mooney, who really know what it takes to make downtowns great, but also Adam Elser, who knows how to make a big company actually work here in Alameda, and a lot of you else on the phone call. So in short, I would love it if you came and visited my site and see my plans and ultimately get your vote, because I want to be one of your biggest cheerleaders, one of your biggest partners in making Alameda as amazing as it could be. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tucson. And thanks to all of you, and good luck to everybody. And I will just, of course, close this out with reminding everyone to vote. November 5th is the election, whether you, as Tommy Clifford said, fill out your ballot and mail it right away, or you like to walk it in or vote in person. Whatever you do, just do it. So this is a critical election. They're all critical, but this feels especially critical. So everyone vote. And with that, Madeline, do you want to close us out? Do you have an update from the chamber?
Thank you so much, Becca. Yes, first of all, thank you so much for the candidates running for council. Wish you all the best. We have a couple of programs that we are running this month, one on October 23rd and one on November 7th. It's about AI training for small business. AI is taken all over the world, and we're supporting that. So we have one on October 23rd on Zoom, and the link will be on chat right now. And the other one is a 2-hour workshop on November 7th from 12 to 2 in person at the chamber office. Hopefully all of you can join us, or you can refer businesses that would like to learn more about how to utilize their AI for their businesses. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thanks, Madeline. And we'll have our final EGA meeting of the year back here on November 13th, Wednesday at 8:30 a.m. We will not meet in December. November 13th, we will have a transportation update. So we'll have the ferry, BART, AC Transit, and City of Alameda. So you don't want to miss it. And we'll see you back here. But in the meantime, vote. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.